Juditha Triumphans is the only surviving oratorium of Antonio Vivaldi. What makes it so special?
Unfortunately, it's the only one which survived. And this piece, we know, is really a very special piece because of these incredible, rich orchestra distributions. Vivaldi had at his disposition the Putte della Pietà, the girls of Ospedale della Pietà. And you know that those young ladies, they were practically playing music every day for hours and hours and having lessons from Vivaldi, or before Vivaldi from Gasparini, and so from the major composers of Venice. And this was really one of the best orchestra in Italy, maybe the best, and one of the very best in Europe. So also foreigners coming to Venice, it was really a must to go to listen to this orchestra. And those girls were also able to play not just one instrument. There were, today we would say, multitasking musicians. I mean, every girl was able maybe even to sing as a soloist, to play organ, to play chitarrone, to play harpsichord, to play violin, and so on. So at least really each one of the girls were able to play 2 or 3 different instruments. And this is the very special things about Juditha. This is also the reason why Juditha is not so often played, because the orchestra distributions, the instruments you need to play this unique piece. There are so many different instruments, but why? Because they were often played by the same players, which was playing the chalumeau, and then from the chalumeau was changing to the flauto dolce, and from flauto dolce, I presume, to the oboe. And this with modern orchestra, or even with Baroque orchestra, is not easy to find musicians which can play different instruments. But just for example, I had the list now in front of me because it's very easy to forget. And also I saw some reviews, and it seems like that I decided, for example, to have the 4 tiorbas. This is not my decision. We are so lucky that Vivaldi wrote clearly what he wants from this score. It's a little bit the same with Orfeo by Monteverdi. Also in the case of Orfeo, we know exactly how rich the orchestra was. In case of Vivaldi, Juditha is really the same, not regarding other operas or that he wrote for the theater, like Orlando Furioso and so. There are only maybe just the description of one flauto traversiere. But in the case of Juditha, is everything extremely detailed in what he wants. So he wants, there are arias for viola d'amore obbligato, for oboe obbligato, for 2 flauti dolci, for 4 tiorbas, which is a unique thing. You never find that in another oeuvre. Obbligato organ, obbligato cembalo, 4 viole da gamba, obbligato mandolin, obbligato chalumeau, 2 clarins, which were the old clarinets, the Baroque clarinets, and of course trumpets and timpani. The very curious thing is that there is not one number in Juditha where all those instruments play together, because as I said, it's very possible that the same player was occupied with different instruments. But to have such a rich palette of sounds and colors is a huge orchestra, and it is very interesting that he was so detailed once to write every clearly which kind of orchestra he wished for this piece. So these already this point make Juditha very, very special.
We are lucky to have in the pit La Cetra, the ensemble that plays this music so fantastically of Vivaldi. How was it for them and for you to get to this performance of this rich instrumentation?
I was so glad that I could come after my Ariodante 2 or 3 years ago, that I could come now doing this incredible score, and this time with La Cetra. Because La Cetra now, regarding Vivaldi, talks as well my mother tongue. Vivaldi is my mother tongue, not only because I was born in Veneto, and also because I talk the language of Vivaldi, the Venetian dialect, which is a language, it's not a dialect, but I'm very proud of it. But this music needs, it has a side of this music looks very, very simple. So you think it's really simple music, and maybe there are also people who think this music is cheap, or even important musicians like Luigi Dalla Piccola or Stravinsky. Vivaldi wrote always the same piece over 500 times. You know, Vivaldi wrote more than 500 concertos. And so if a musician like Stravinsky writes and say he wrote the same piece 500 times, is difficult to talk against Stravinsky. But maybe that is why he misunderstood the music, because he did not understood the language of this music. And so I was so glad to have La Cetra, because with them, as well as with Venice Baroque Orchestra, I shared this piece so many times. And we had, with La Cetra, literally, we played the piece already over 25 times. So we have this language is now in our body. It's not anymore possible for this orchestra to read this music in a vertical way. This music is absolutely horizontal and full of nuances, and you have to treat this music with a lot of sometimes sensuality, sometimes it's very dramatic, sometimes as really an incredible driving force. But if you just read the notes, is nothing. So you need really to make interpretation out of this music without doing anything strange, or without using the music to make your own tricks. I think what we are doing is absolutely natural and respecting the score as much as possible. But you need to know this language, which is completely different from Bach language or from Handel language. And also, yes, because I named Bach, for example, responding then to Stravinsky. If Stravinsky is saying Vivaldi wrote the same piece over 500 times, but why Bach transcribed almost 20 concertos of Vivaldi? He should have transcribed only one, don't you think so? So if Bach himself was so fascinated by this music, there must be a reason. If you don't find the way to read this music and to understand the style, of course, this music also could maybe sound also cheap and boring, what almost never happened with Bach, because Bach has such an incredible solidity in terms of harmony, in terms of concept. And the music of Vivaldi is very spontaneous, always. He was very proud to be able to compose so quickly. He was proud to say the copyist is lower copying my music than me composing the same music. So this act of creating music in this very, very fast tempo also need then, in terms of interpretation, to have the music always fresh and alive. Remember that he wrote Tito Manlio, an opera Vivaldi wrote for Mantova. At the end of the score, which is autograph, we have the autograph, he writes very proudly, composta in 5 giorni. So he composed Tito Manlio, opera of nearly 4 hours. He composed it in 5 days. So this speediness, I don't know any other composer who wrote so quickly. Mozart did for sure also very quickly. But Handel, we know an opera was a work of 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So Vivaldi was, maybe he composed Juditha also in 5 days. I guess no longer than 1 week. And this freshness, I think is like the fresh bread. When the bread come out, it's still warm and croccante. The same is this music. And if you just play it, you repeat what you learn, then it sounds boring, and this is not Vivaldi anymore.
Something else which is very special in Juditha Triumphans is that we have the main characters all sung by female voices, but they are mezzo-soprani. Can you tell a bit more about this?
Yes, the soloist part, the vocal parts, is even more demanding than for the orchestra part. I mean, as I said, the orchestra part is full of solo arias with very where the single player of the orchestra has to act as a soloist as well, playing kinds of duetto or terzetto with the soloist, the vocal soloist. And in Juditha, we have the roles are really written for 5 mezzo-sopranos. I don't know. I cannot imagine why Vivaldi didn't use really a soprano, but it's also true that all the roles are a little bit different in itself. So, for example, Ozias is quite low, is lower. Abra is a little bit higher. So you have the low mezzo as you have the high mezzo. But in any case, we have for this production 5 fantastic singers, because the parts they have to sing, they're really extremely virtuosistic and demanding. So, for example, Vagaus has almost 2 arias which are almost impossible to sing in terms of virtuosity. And Vivaldi, you know, he was the first violin virtuoso. So the first virtuoso in music history was Vivaldi. The idea of having one soloist in front of the orchestra playing that was Vivaldi's invention. That was himself, because he knew how good he was. So he was writing concerti, of course, for himself as well. But the same kind of virtuosity, because he knew so well the Putte della Pietà, he knew perfectly, she can do this, she can do So we have actually the most difficult technically seen part is really the part of Vagaus, which we have here fantastic Vasilisa Berzanskaya. The most poetical part is, of course, Juditha, and she also sings most of the arias. She has, I think, 6 or 7 pieces, and this part is exactly written for a special girl of the Pietà, and we have here fantastic Gail Arquez. Then we have Polly Leach for Abra, and we have Teresa Iervolino for Oloferne. And Francesca Sciotti for Ozias. So it's true, 5 mezzos, but really 5 different colors of the voice, and with extremely demanding vocal technique. But not only this virtuosity, you need to sing well Vivaldi, you also need the typical Venetian sensuality and melancholy as well, and all the nuances you have to do with the voice. And also the other fantastic aspect of this piece is to make Latin once again alive. I'm every time shocked how Latin actually can be used in opera, because of course we normally listen to Latin through the sacred music. But to have it in an opera, well, it was an oratorium, but now to listen in this version, Juditha as an opera seria, is also very impressive. So the recits as well are very, very important. Scolpire la parola, the pronunciation, all the technique of the accenti. So there is a huge work has been done for them, for those fantastic 5 soloists, to sing in the best possible way this fantastic Juditha.
There is still a lot unknown about the works and the life of Vivaldi. One of the aspects, even with Juditha Triumphans, is that we don't even know whether there has been an overture to the piece or not. Was there an overture? Is it lost? And what do they do today with that aspect?
Well, if you do it as an opera production, like we are doing now, I think you have to think about an overture. But as an oratorium, and we know it was performed in 1716 or 1717, maybe the end of 16 or beginning of 17. at the Chiesa della Pietà in Venice, maybe is also was an idea of Vivaldi to start with this incredible shocking choir, which is the first number of the Juditha. Like to say, really directly in the middle of the action, in medias res, puff. And but for an opera production in a theater, yes, maybe you could use two movements, as Vivaldi always did before this wonderful choir. We have the symphonias of Vivaldi written for operas. They are also in three movements. So then why not? But I think it's also valid the idea of starting directly with a choir, the first number of Juditha, if you are not doing an opera production. In this case, we decided to take this concerto that is called Concerto per Amsterdam, because we know that Vivaldi wrote this piece, or better to say, he adapted this piece, which is also a piece for solo violin, solo oboe, solo timpano, and solo two trumpets. It's also a kind of concerto grosso with multiple instruments as a soloist. It's also a crazy new idea of Vivaldi. And so it fit perfectly to the city and to this production. That was the idea of having. It's not a new idea because some other colleagues used the same piece also for a recording. But of course, there is nothing more appropriate to play this piece for this production at the beginning of this. Let's call it opera seria Juditha Triumphans.
And there is a special link between Vivaldi and Amsterdam.
Yes, there is a very special link, and maybe not really everybody knows about that. In fact, the city in Europe where was possible to listen to Vivaldi music outside Venice, the first city was really Amsterdam, because Vivaldi music was printed. The first opus and the second opus, they were printed in Venice. But then the opus 3, this was a very, very important L'Estro Armonico, and this the opus 3 where Vivaldi really became famous in Europe. This opus 3 was printed in Amsterdam in 1711 by Etienne Roger. And the organist in this time of the Nieuwe Kerk in the Dam, the new fantastic organ, the organist was Jan Jacob de Graaf. He was a blind organist. And of course, he had a direct and very quick connection with Etienne Roger, because he could, I imagine, listen to this music very quickly. Had music in his hands, and he was blind, but he could have people playing it anyway. He was famous, this de Graaf, because he used to play Vivaldi concertos and other Italian concertos adapted by himself for the organ in the Nieuwe Kerk. So this was Vivaldi in the Nieuwe Kerk in 1711, 1712. And in fact, in 1712, Johann Mattheson, very important figure in Germany, writes about him in a book, writes that he heard Vivaldi music for the first time in the Nieuwe Kerk in Amsterdam. As well, Johann Ernst von Sachsen, the Prince from Sachsen, who was in Weimar, Bach worked for him. He was also composer, and in the same years, Ernst von Sachsen was studying at the University of Utrecht. And also in the same years, he could listen the concerts of de Graaf in the Nieuwe Kerk, and as well, he was so impressed that he also started to write in this Vivaldian style. And not only this, he took back to Weimar Vivaldi concertos, and especially Opus 3, and then Bach used this music to make his own transcription for the organ. As you know, we have the Grosso Mogul, and then the Concerto in La Minore, Concerto in Re Minore, and then all the other adaptation Bach did for solo harpsichord as well, and of course the adaptation of the concerto for 4 violins in B minor, that in the transcription of Bach became the famous concerto for 4 harpsichords. So the link between Vivaldi and Amsterdam is really very important. And that's why we are all very proud and happy to be here with Juditha Triumphans.